Okay, you're back with us for our series on presidentiables and vice presidentiables. And with us tonight is presidentiable Miriam Defensor Santiago. First question, how come you're no vice president up to now?
Because we are leaving the best for last.
You actually nominated somebody, or somebody filed for the vice presidency, but I think your plan is to substitute as soon as you can get... you really have someone in mind.
Oh, yes, yes. Evidently, I only asked one of my campaign staff members to file a certificate of candidacy so that I can avail of the right of substitution as provided for under the Omnibus Election Code. In effect, it's just keeping the seat warm for somebody else.
The perception of a lot of people is nobody wants to join you because, I don't know if it's anything else other than maybe they're intimidated by your, the kind of president you'd be, or perhaps because they don't seriously believe you can win.
I hope that the lack of a vice presidential candidate so far will not be taken as any indication of the mitigated capacity to project sex appeal on the part of the presidential candidate. But that in a certain degree, to a certain degree, is accurate. Nobody wants to run with me for the simple reason that I cannot offer them the hundreds of millions that the other presidential candidates have been offering to me to run as their vice presidential candidate. So I imagine that this is the accepted modus operandi, to offer a person hundreds of millions of pesos so that the person can be persuaded to run as a vice presidential candidate. I do not have this political management approach.
Okay, Arab Estrada just said that somebody offered him 200 million to run as vice president. Has anyone offered you that kind of money to run as somebody else's vice president?
More or less, that figure, yes.
About 200, that's the going rate for vice president?
That's right.
You don't have 200 million?
No, I don't.
How do you expect to get a vice president if that's supposed to be the political way of doing it?
By appealing to the sense of idealism of the Filipino.
Not using your sex appeal.
Unfortunately, I have been happily married for the last 20 years.
Are there still Filipinos like that? Are there still Filipinos who will run as a vice president, sit quietly for 6 years doing nothing maybe, or handling a cabinet job just for idealism? You believe you can find somebody like that?
In a sense, I am wagering my political future on this proposition. Whether I'm correct or not, the immediate future will soon prove.
Well, why not one of your senatorial candidates to run for vice president? You're still looking for that one particular person qualified for the presidency.
Because I have ongoing negotiations with a number of individuals, and this was made plain at the very start, long before the deadline for the filing of the certificate of candidacy. And because certain of our senatorial candidates, like former Governor Leviste, for example, who is seated on my right, absolutely have no interest in the post of vice president. They feel that they can be more effective as senators.
I noticed from the list that Tony Leviste gave me a while ago that you actually have 17 senatorial candidates. You know, before you came tonight, I thought you had 3. So you actually have 17. How come there's been very little publicity about them? Let me just read them out quickly. General Fortunato Abad, Governor Carlos Cajelo, General Domenico Casas, Commodore Dante de Guzman, Dr. Beth Del Rio, General Renato Ecarmad. 5 generals. Melencio Ines, Governor Antonio Leviste, Dr. Abdullah Madale, General Jaime Muyargas, Ramon Rosa, Antonio Policarpio, Attorney Mariano Reyes, Jonathan Rivera, Efren Sumahit, Al Umali, Dr. Manuel Uy. Half of them not exactly household names.
You are correct.
How did you choose them?
Some of them are just keeping the seat warm, as is the registered vice presidential candidate at this time.
So is there a possibility that you will pick up from the other senatorial slates, for example, and then keep them as a common candidate?
That is the exact precise intent.
So it's possible that you could get some from the LDP, LP, PDP, Nacionalista Party, and put them in your slate,
yes,
even if they're carried on the other side.
That's right, plus some of those who have already filed their certificates as independent candidates.
Okay, your chances of winning, you're on top of all the poll surveys. Every survey that's ever been taken, Miriam Defensor Santiago is #1. But people say your votes are not going to get counted. That's the name of the game. In Philippine politics, you're popular all over the country, but people may vote for you, but they won't count your vote. How are you going to guarantee that you have a fighting chance, at least?
I cannot guarantee anything at this stage. What I would like to do is, I would like to raise the inquiry among the Filipino constituency listening to this program this evening. Are we going to continue keeping Philippine elections purely meretricious? Are we going to vote for a person simply because we think he has the money to buy votes or has the capability to cheat the presidency for himself? Because if that is the intent of our elections in this so-called democracy, then we don't need national elections. What we must do then is identify the top dozen smugglers in the country and ask them to elect the next president among themselves, because he would be the richest man in the country if riches were the sole criterion, or if the sole criterion was the capability for cheating, then let's just ask the inmates of Muntinlupa to vote from among themselves the next president of the Philippines, because some of the most excellent, superb practitioners of cheating are right there. But that is not the intent of the elections. The intent of the elections in a democracy is to express the will of the people. And this will has been so repeatedly expressed that it comes as no surprise that the results have been maintained as of the latest nationwide presidential survey conducted by this radio network that you have just mentioned.
Okay, in Tagalog, no, I'm sure that there are a lot of people watching us. They're saying, oh nga, gusto kong iboto si Miriam Santiago, pero pag ibinoto ko, sayang lang eh, hindi naman bibilangin, dadayain naman yan. Eh, ganun din naman, wala siyang organisasyon, wala siyang pera. Paano siyang lalaban kay Mitra, kay Cojuangco, kay Ramos? Eh, yung mga yan, may organisasyon, may pera, may grupo. O, anong sasabihin mo sa tao?
Kung pakikinggan natin ang mga traditional politicians o ang mga trapo, baliwala pala ang gusto ng ating sambayanan. Kung hindi, ang napakahalaga pala sa tingin ng mga trapo ay ang pera lamang o ang makinarya para pandaraya. Ngayon, ganyan na lang ba liit ang tingin natin sa mamamayang Pilipino? Ganyan na lang ba ang ating palakad na hindi na natin iniisip o sinusuri kung sino ang pinakamagaling o ang sino ang tao na dapat magiging pangulo ng ating republika, kung hindi tinitingnan lamang natin sino ba ang limpak-limpak ang pera niya para magamit niyang pambili ng boto, at hindi na ba natin titingnan saan niya kinuha yung pera niyan? Kasi itong mga trapos na ito, pinagmamalaki nila, meron daw silang 10 bilyong pisong panggastos. Saan nila kinuha yan kung hindi nila ninakaw din nung nasa gobyerno sila? Yan bang mga uri ng pagtatanong ay kalimutan na lang natin, talikuran na lang natin, at masisilaw na lang tayo sa pera nitong mga taong ito? Yun sana ang pakiusap ko sa sambayanan.
Louis, there are also practical considerations why things are happening that will prevent the cheating of Miriam from becoming president of the Philippines. Ito yung ngayon lamang nangyari sa ating political history. Una ay, for the first time, there's a synchronized election. Hindi na maaring quid pro quo. You scratch my back, the local officials. You scratch my back next time, the national officials. Ito'y kanya na. Secondly, there's this provision in the Constitution of multi-party system. Kung 8 ang kandidato, ang magiging watcher diyan. Kaya they will be watching each other. And probably most important,
mahirap dayain yung 7.
magkakahirapan.
Kung pwede yung isa lang, madaling dayain.
Kung solohan, maaari mong bilhin yung katapat mo. Pero kung 7 ang bibilin mo, baka hindi mo pa mabilin lahat. But most important of all probably is observe how the COMELEC is doing its job this time. It's not playing politics or even fooling around. Tignan mo yung nakalagay ngayon sa mga headlines na re-registration ng mga cities, yung gun ban. Now, this is proof that there's going to be honest elections, and when that happens, that's all Miriam needs to become president of the Philippines.
Okay, you know, every day we read, itong si ganitong mayor, sumama kay Mitra, itong ganitong governor, sumama kay Cojuangco, itong ganitong congressman, sumama kay Ramos. Parang the whole political organization of the country is being split up among the candidates. Some go with Salonga, some with Laurel. Nobody seems to be going to you, no? Sa line-up mo, halimbawa, wala akong nakikitang ni isang incumbent governor, congressman, senator, etc. Hindi ba, ano ba, ikaw ba tumatanggi o ikaw ang tinatanggihan nila?
It is a mutual process, I imagine.
So, how will that not affect your chances? Like, you know, if a mayor goes with you, the assumption is, may mga kampanya sa'yo, there's somebody will campaign for you in that town. But if you don't have a local candidate, for example, how do you expect anyone to campaign for you in that town?
We are trying our best to field candidates at the local level. But we must remember that there are certain considerations of political strategy that impinge on this process at this moment. For example, we have to wait until March 23, which is the deadline for filing the certificates of local candidacy, in order that we can fully determine who is in which political camp. Because in my case, for example, no incumbent local official will want to be identified with me before March 23. Why? Because if he already belongs to an established political party and he affiliates with me at this time, by March 23, his own party will put up a rival candidate to contest his own incumbency. Whereas, if he remains identified with his old political party until March 23, the day for the filing of the certificate of candidacy, on the 24th, there will be nothing more that his party can do against him. So even if he then comes out publicly in my favor, there will no longer be any sharp or acute danger of retaliation by a political party.
So what you're saying is, on March 24, you expect a lot of these mayors in areas where you're strong to openly support your candidacy.
That is correct.
Ang totoo niyan, Luis, 73 provinces, 60 cities, 1,500 municipalities and 200 congressional districts. May mga naka-file na ang iniintay na lamang ay paglabas ni Miriam. At ito nga ay doon sa pagdating ng March 23, ay bibindisyon na lamang mga opisyal. Pero patong-patong rin ang mga application.
Among the proclamation rallies, you held yours in Araneta Coliseum, which surprised a lot of people. And there was a lot of speculation. How much did you make hakot? How much did you pay to go there? What sort of a budget did you spend? And yet you had, what, 30,000 people in the Coliseum. Are you going to tell us tonight that those people came voluntarily?
Yes, I stand by this proposition. 20,000 people went to Araneta Coliseum, 5 bus loads of voters from Central Luzon, from different provinces in that area, were unable to enter the Coliseum at all, simply because there was no more breathing space there. I mean, we did not give them any money for their presence. What we did was to undertake the expenses for their transportation. We didn't even have enough money to give them all sandwiches.
They brought their own sandwich.
I hope so.
Okay.
And I hope they forgive me for the omission.
Okay, issues, no? You have major issues coming up. I think the line that Ramos and his group are following are, in the words of the campaign manager, Trade Secretary Garucho, former Trade Secretary, is jobs, jobs, jobs. They're going to give jobs to people. Speaker Mitra said in, I think it was in Malabon yesterday, that he was going to give 900,000 jobs. And Dandingo Huangco, one time when I interviewed him here, said he would provide 700,000 jobs. You have that kind of a program also in your platform of government?
No, because there are already an indeterminate number of pies in the sky, and I don't want to add to the population.
You think you're just, are you saying that these guys are just dreaming?
Naturally. The mere sound of the rhetoric of which you have just unburdened yourself already indicates that this is nothing but trite political verbiage. It's nothing but logoria, excess wordage from candidates who don't mean it. For we all know that the hypocrisy level in Philippine politics is extremely high.
But there are unemployed, and I suppose a lot of them will be asking, what difference can a Miriam candidacy or a Miriam presidency mean for us? Is it going to be more jobs if she becomes president?
Anybody can promise an infinite number of jobs, for the simple reason that there is an unemployment rate of maybe 15 to 17% in the country today, one of the highest unemployment rates in Asia. That's why the traditional politicians will pander to this deep hunger among our population. But they have never explained or expostulated in great detail on what the mechanisms will be. Do they, for example, tell our people that in order to solve the unemployment problem, government will have to create 1.24 million new jobs every year, and that this will necessitate capitalization of at least 148 billion pesos? Have they explained to the people in serious, intelligent, literate terms where they mean to get this capitalization?
Can you explain that to the people?
Yes, we must vitalize and promote exports, foreign investment, and tourism. That is the only way to solve the unemployment problem. Only export-led growth can possibly provide the linchpin for economic stability, including people employing enterprises.
So, what can you promise? You know, I'm not asking you to promise anything, but with all these guys promising jobs, you know, all kinds of things, political stability and everything, what is going to be the first thing people can expect of a Miriam Santiago presidency in July 1992?
I don't want to add to this, oh, promise me chorus, but I would like simply to explain, as I have in thousands of other forums throughout the archipelago, that the 4 centerpiece programs of the People's Reform Party, under which I am running for president, are as follows. Number 1, we must fight graft and corruption. Number 2, we have to build low-cost mass housing. Number 3, we have to promote export-oriented industries. And number 4, we have to develop the tourism industry.
There's one columnist who called your program voodoo economics. In other words, it's just words. It doesn't really mean anything. You say specifically graft and corruption. How much do you expect the government to save on a really sincere, truly direct and viable program against graft and corruption? Do you expect to save money or earn money?
Well, this is not my own estimate. It's the estimates of campus academicians specializing in public administration, and more or less there seems to be a consensus that the country can raise more or less the figure of 200 billion pesos if we are able to reduce graft and corruption to the irreducible minimum.
Well, graft and corruption involves catching somebody, trying him in court, and then sending him to jail. You've been a judge. You know how long the process is. I think the Eldon Magwan case is hanging right now. There are changes in the witnesses, etc. If we cannot even pursue a murder case to the point where the perpetrator is eventually punished after only a short period, how can you possibly clean up the government with an anti-graft and corruption program?
I have written a little book, which is a how-to manual. It's not a scholarly treatise. It is a manual that is intended for the activist hands-on administrator. It's called How to Fight Graft, and I have detailed there the 15 basic strategies without need of any big budget or any substantial increase in the existing manpower in government, which would substantially carry forward the thrust towards clean government and against graft and corruption. But you're asking how I hope to succeed if the prosecutorial system takes so long. Prosecution and punitive action against those who practice graft and corruption is negative. My program accentuates the positive, which is prevention and deterrence. And in my book, for example, I explain that one of the most effective measures against graft and corruption will be to launch productivity incentive schemes in our civil service, particularly in revenue-producing agencies.
You did that in the Bureau of Immigration?
I did that in CID, and it succeeded.
If they process the papers faster, you pay them a little bit more.
That is correct.
So that would be one way of eradicating graft and corruption. It's not a question of just building bigger prisons.
There's also, Louis, an unquantifiable factor here. When you reform the culture of graft, you restore the faith of the Filipino to the government, and then you bring about a stable situation. Once the situation is stabilized, tourists will come to the Philippines, and if we could only raise our influx of tourists to 5 million like Thailand does, we could raise enough foreign exchange to pay for our annual oil bill, or to amortize our foreign debts, or even build all the houses for the scholars.
In other words, stop kidnapping tourists.
Right.
Okay, we'll take a break for a few reminders. Okay, ang dami pong mga tawag na pumapasok dito. Let's try out a few. Anthony, he is using my family name, Beltran, Caloocan City. Mrs. Santiago, kung mananalo, sa tingin nyo ba hindi kayo madidiktahan ng inyong asawa?
I educated my husband early in my married life that we have absolutely separate professional lives and careers to pursue. And since my husband is educable, unlike my rivals and my opponents, whom, when I am addressing them, propel me to despair because of the impossibility of educating the non-educable. But as I said, since my husband does not belong in this category, he has learned his lesson well.
You've educated him. Okay, there are several questions here about your husband. These are all about Mr. Santiago, and it asks whether he committed graft and corruption in the Bureau of Customs, and it also asks about that Celica that he is supposed to have acquired, etc. I suppose you have, would you like to answer or comment on that?
Oo. Kung naghahanap buhay kayo sa paninira ng ibang tao, sana naman mag-isip na kayo ng ibang topiko dahil 3 taon na ninyong paulit-ulit yan eh. You're not earning your retainers from the presidential candidates who have hired you to launch the black propaganda campaign against me. Ako naman ang kalaban nyo, di akong kalabanin ninyo. You've asked this question from my husband and the poor man has answered it for the last 3 years. His answer, as I recall, is these charges were initially filed against him and he was exonerated after thorough investigation. So, as far as the judicial and judicial administrative system is concerned, he is innocent. He has been proved innocent. He's been raked over the coals over these charges. Ngayon ba ay ulit ba ako'y kandidato, ulit-ulitin pa natin ito. Pag-usapan naman natin ibang bagay. Halimbawa, yung mga asawa ng ibang kandidato, ilan ba mga asawa nila?
Teka muna, I won't ask you to be specific. Baka magkagulo rito. Okay. Lindo Adangan, Olongapo, taga Olongapo siya. Sabi niya, Dick Gordon is your best partner in this coming election.
That's entirely possible, and I would agree in that assessment. But Mr. Gordon, I understand, has other considerations to bear in mind.
Okay, Ruel Lara, Quezon City. Sa palagay mo ba yung ginawa mo sa CID ay kaya mong gawin sa bayan kung sakaling maging presidente ka, considering that the CID is just a mere agency compared to the country?
Oo, palagi nila ginagamit paninira sa akin iyan. Sabi nila, nagtagumpay ka sa maliit lamang na opisina. Now, how can you have the gall? How can you have the intestinal courage to try and reform the entire country on the basis of a reformative procedure in a tiny agency? And the answer to that is, every journey of 1,000 miles always begins with one step. We already proved that it is possible. Many people said it is impossible to clean up the CID because it was one of the most notoriously corrupt agencies in government. But by the grace of God and the support of all the fine Filipino men and women, many of whom are listening to this show right now, in the CID we did the impossible. Again, now that I am running virtually as a third force in Philippine politics, we hear the same Cassandras of doom saying it is impossible for any person, no matter how popular, to win unless that person has the capability to buy votes or to cheat or to terrorize. I say to these men of little faith, we will do the impossible for the second time.
Okay, a lot of people tell me, including some of the students that I had in UP who are supporting you. They're saying, Miriam Santiago comes on too strong. Masyadong matindi yung dating niya. Yung nakakatakot na. Yung masyado siyang matinding tumira. Masyado siyang madiin na manginsulto. Have you ever thought about, going back to being a Maria Clara type of presidential candidate? Maglalabas ng panyo paminsan-minsan at
Unang-una, kalahati nitong mga nagsasabing ito, mga upahan ito, nakasali talaga sa black propaganda ng mga kalaban ko. Now for those who have legitimately raised this point, my answer is this. Have you ever tried to fight graft and corruption? It's like going up into a boxing ring against the reigning world champion with one hand tied behind your back. You know why? Because in the battle between good and evil, in the battle between good government and graft and corruption, there is always a restriction or a limitation on the part of those who do battle for the sake of good or for the sake of good government. They are limited by the restrictions either of their faith or of their own intellectual convictions. For example, we are taught by our religion it's a sin to tell a lie and it's a sin to steal. But the enemy, those who are engaged in evil, those who are practitioners of graft and corruption, suffer under no such restrictions. That's why the battle is uneven. The playing field is not level. And you cannot fight graft and corruption by the sheer display or manifestation of good manners and right conduct. Hindi hihinto ang katiwalian sa gobyerno. Ulit sinabi mong paki o kaya nagpasalamat ka, kailangan ilaban mo talaga. That's why my candidacy in effect posits this proposition to the Filipino people. Are we genuinely sincere about the crusade against graft and corruption? For if so, we need a strong, decisive, and visionary leader.
Natakot doon. Okay, madami pang mga questions dito. Well, one of the things that they keep bringing up, I've heard this in polite conversation, in private talks and everything, meron daw kuliling sa ulo si Miriam Santiago. No? may diferensya, you were confined in a psychiatric ward at one time or another. You know, but this is said in whispers. I notice they never say it in print because they know you're a good lawyer and they don't broadcast it either. But they mention it in whispers. Have you heard that kind of talk?
Of course, this is part of the whispering campaign against me. Kamukha no tong nakaraang debate ng mga presidential candidates na na-televise para hindi natin maloko o malito ang taong bayan ay pinakita talaga sa television para malaman kung sino talaga ang matino doon, ang sino talaga ang brain damaged or genetically retarded. Kaya alam na ng sambayanan. Ngayon, kaya nila binubulong iyan dahil alam nila, hindi nila mapatunayan at hindi naman maniniwala kung seryoso nilang sasabihin. Pero kung papulong na mukhang chismis, alam nila baka merong maengganyo dyan. Needless to say, the answer to this rumor or piece of gossip is in the absolute and categorical negative. It has absolutely no relation to reality. The gossip, as you say, is that apparently I was confined in a mental institution because my biodata is very long and I always graduated with honors from the University of the Philippines or the University of Michigan. Just because I did well in school does not necessarily correlate to the fact that I may have been confined in some institution, which is absolutely untrue. But assuming for the sake of argument that I was confined in an institution, mental or otherwise, wherever it was that I went, I challenged my opponents, they should go there also, for it might help to increase their IQs.
Magpakulong. Okay. Na marami rin itong mga tawag din. How can you become a member of the PRP? At the co-op Mandaluyong, where can we get an application form?
At our campaign headquarters on 25 EDSA, Makati.
Anonymous Santiago, you have no money, but you will win for sure. I want to join your party.
Thank you.
Bad Holy, Makati, although you say you don't have a party and no money, don't you think that even with the ban on advertising for election, that you might win anyway, even if you don't spend money because people will vote for you because you are you, even if you don't spend the 10 pesos per voter, as you have stated, was the minimum. The only problem will be if foreign interests steer away and want someone else. This country needs you. You think
and may
the
I add that under the Omnibus Election Code, foreign intervention in the Philippine electoral process, direct or indirect, is absolutely proscribed and is a ground for a disqualification of the candidate.
Are you joining the LDP and other parties about Secretary Ramos, about his trip to Zurich? Do you have anything to say about that, his trip to Switzerland, Secretary Ramos?
It is a puzzle within an enigma, within a conundrum, to use the words of Winston Churchill.
Pag nanonood ho kayo kay Amir-Hazsann, kailangan may katabi kayong diksyonaryo eh. A puzzle within an enigma, within a conundrum. Naiwan na ako dun sa conundrum. Okay, Peter Silva Tondo, Mrs. Santiago, kailan po ang birthday ninyo? Ano ang gagawin mo sa mga hidden wealth ni Imelda? Dalawang tanong. Birthday muna.
June 15, 1945. And what will I do with the alleged hidden wealth of another candidate? We must allow the legal or judicial system to take their full course.
Diretsong tanong. Noel Merañas, Malabon. Mrs. Santiago, being a presidentiable, pwede bang malaman kung ano ang inyong financial status?
Umaasa lamang ako sa mga abuloy na sinasaad ng ating Omnibus Election Code. The Election Code, which is the prevailing law among presidential candidates, allows a candidate like myself to receive the sum of no more than 10 pesos per voter. If there are 35 million voters, then this should come to about 350 million pesos. So I am hoping that I will be able to raise this money
Ang
from
late
the
naman
legitimate
nun. Pambili lang ng vice presidential candidate.
That's correct, yes, but that is the ceiling that is set by the law.
Okay, one of the things I noticed during the night of the presidential ball put up by the IBP and the PBA, you were the only one who answered that the military could move and take over this country in the event that the elections are rotten or dirty. You still hold to that? I notice you have 5 retired generals in your ticket.
Yes, because if we analyze the situation, what is the root cause of the problems of society today? Why cannot we attract foreign investment in the volume and the numbers that we need in our economy? Answer, because there is no political stability. If we elect a president by a mere plurality vote, maybe this is indubitable, maybe this is inescapable because of the multi-party system provided for by our Constitution. But it is essential that even if elected by a plurality vote, the next president should enjoy genuine public support. And thus, even if elected by a plurality vote, it goes to the essence of an effective presidency starting this year, that the next president should be at the top of the presidential surveys. For if he wins by a mere plurality and was at the bottom of the surveys, my analysis is that in a very short period of time, he will simply incite or provoke disturbance in society. In other words, possibly a coup d'etat or some such violent, smart attempt to take over government.
You're saying that if someone is below in the presidential surveys and suddenly after the elections he wins, in effect that in between being below and winning the elections, there's something rotten in the elections. You're going to interpret that way?
Yes, that's right, because it can only mean that the person won because of bribery and cheating.
So you think it will provoke a military action?
Exactly. History has shown that this pattern is inevitable under the same situation.
Okay, President Duro of Makati, Dr. Santiago, what is your stand regarding squatters who are like mushrooms growing everywhere and becoming eyesores?
That is a legitimate concern, and for that reason, the second centerpiece program of the People's Reform Party, after the first program, which is to fight graft and corruption, the second program is to build low-cost mass housing along the lines that have been designed and implemented in Singapore.
Okay, let's see how you look at your opponents. Secretary Ramos says that he is the answer to political stability in the country.
I don't wish to go individually down the line among my presidential rivals, because I am so biased that there can be no hope that I can give an impartial or objective assessment of my rivals. All I can say is this: there are, as of last count, 8 serious presidential contenders. Of these 8 presidential candidates, 7 are certainly suffering from self-delusion.
Let's go over what they represent without mentioning the candidates. Would you have a program for a healing presidency?
Did you say stealing presidency? Oh, you said healing.
Healing.
All right.
Okay, a healing presidency to heal the wounds of society, the fighting, the enmity, etc. Would you be able to do that, or are you going to spend 6 years fighting with Congress and the Senate?
That is a rhetorical question. It answers itself. Naturally, the president, by the sheer magnitude of the office to which he has ascended, must necessarily attempt to unite the population, and beyond that, the psychology of the people themselves behind his leadership. That is a natural function of leadership, unity.
How about economic expertise? Have you ever run several huge corporations to enable you to prescribe economic solutions to many of the country's problems?
I have sat as a member of the board of directors of possibly maybe a dozen government corporations when I was in the CID and in the DAR, but I have never myself managed a large corporation, and for that matter, hindi naman ako nagnakaw ng pera dito sa mga korporasyon ng gobyerno na pinatakbo ko. Kaya kung yun ang pinag-uusapan, yung karanasan sa pagnakaw sa mga negosyo ng gobyerno, I will say that I have absolutely no expertise in that respect.
So you're not going to treat the Philippines as Philippines Incorporated, for example?
I will not engage in the so-called mining industry according to scuttlebutt. I will not say, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine.
Okay. Be-break po tayo sa ilang patalasta. Okay, alam ho ninyo, kinaklasify namin ng mga tanong dito. Iba-ibang kategory. Meron mga ilang personal. Mount Ramos, Caloocan City, Dr. Santiago, meron ho ba kayong kamag-anak incorporated?
No, and my experience in CID proves that. There was, among the many pieces of mud that they slung at me when I was in the Immigration Commission, not one concerned my relatives, because there simply was no connection between that charge and reality.
Okay, Aleli de los Santos Malabon, Mrs. Santiago, why do you look so young now?
Because I have been released from the bondage of public service. When I was in government, I was so focused on the crusade against graft and corruption that many times even I despaired that I might not be able to live up to the expectations of our young people. Fortunately, we were able to receive help in that direction.
Rosalyn Dulay Singalong, Mrs. Santiago, why did you study shooting?
Because I wanted to put my money where my mouth was, since in the CID I was talking so tough against the alien criminal syndicates, I felt it was necessary that I must make some physical manifestation of the will to fight the syndicates, and that was best manifested by taking up target shooting, which incidentally I found to be as easy as picking peanuts.
You mean
They make smart guns now. Actually, these guns, if you just point them in a certain direction, will hit the bullseye anyway.
Okay, talking about bullseyes, Governor Libiste.
Yes, Louis.
We were talking a while ago about a nationwide organization. Can you tell us what sort of an organization Secretary Santiago has?
Well, like I explained earlier, we do have applicants for all the positions in the local positions.
Right now, how many people have you got working for you?
The organization itself have many volunteer workers. Very few are paid, incidentally, and this is one reason why I believe that the chances of Miriam are great. Because ang mga tumutulong ay kusa at hindi yung binabayaran lamang.
So do you have from Aparit to Hulo?
Yes, this all started out with the movers yet, not with the PRP alone. And now they're consolidated and they're all supporting the candidacy of Miriam.
Oh, Secretary Santiago, one of the things that, you know, the conventional politicians, you call them trapos, but I like to call them conventional politicians. Mas polite yun eh. They always say, yun si Miriam, magaling lang yan sa mga city, you know. She goes to a city, she talks before an educated audience. Siyempre, malakas ang ano niyan. Pero hindi pa nakakatuntong yan sa parang, sa bukid. Hindi naghahanap ng pagkain sa gubat. O marunong mag-araro o ganun. Yung, hindi ka mo lang alam yun eh. Can you tell us what sort of a background do you have? Napunta ka na ba sa rural area? Have you ever been to a bukid?
Of course, for the past 2 years, I have gone throughout the length and breadth of our archipelago. I have delivered commencement speeches where it was necessary for me to hike through rice paddies in order to reach the program or the program location or the venue. And where it was necessary, for example, to hold a meeting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon because the last trip to the nearest barangay by jeep or by bus took place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's how rural we have reached. But the easiest answer to that carping is this. The nationwide presidential surveys cover not only the highly urbanized areas of our country, but also the rural areas. So that is the most effective answer.
What sort of a background do you have? I think a lot of people don't know whether you grew up in the farm or you have a rural background or you grew up among a rich family, etc. What sort of childhood did you have? Where did you grow up? What sort of a community were you born in?
I was born to a genteel but poor family. I am the eldest of 7 brothers and sisters, all 6 of whom I helped to send through college.
They're all professionals.
They're all professionals by now.
Could you tell us what sort of professions they're in?
Yes, there are 4 of us lawyers in the family, plus 1 medical doctor who has just arrived from the United States, and is staying in the country until the election campaign is finished.
Is she an American citizen? Is she interfering?
No.
Yeah, no, she's not an American citizen. Okay.
And I have a brother who is a graduate of the Philippine Military Academy, and another one who is in education.
How did you meet your husband?
We were classmates at the UP College of Law.
You finished? Did he finish also? Did he graduate as a lawyer?
Yes, he did.
I'm just joking, of course. Maraming, I don't know where to begin in all of these questions. We only have a few minutes left. Mrs. Santiago, what will you do if you lose the presidential race? Is it true that you said that you would go to the United States and study, or is this a sign of sour graping?
No, it's not. The truth is that I was removed from the cabinet December '89, and in about February 1990, only 2 months later, a director, a dean in fact, of Harvard came to Manila, and I was requested by a high-ranking government official to sit down with this Harvard dean for breakfast just before a flight for Bangkok, where I was attending an international conference. And to accommodate the friend, I did, and the dean offered me a scholarship at the Harvard School, the Kennedy School of Public Administration. When this was offered to me, I was already entertaining designs to enter politics. And so I wrote Harvard and requested them to defer the scholarship until September 1992 on the premise that if I lost as a presidential candidate, I would avail of the scholarship. Otherwise, I'd never be able to make use of it.
So you'd avail of it if you lost?
That's right.
Do you think about losing? You know, I think that was a question they ask everybody. If you lose, are you going to accept defeat?
I have said that if I am cheated in the elections, I will not concede.
You won't concede, but you won't launch a coup d'etat or something like that.
Did I say this?
No, no. Okay. Maligab yun. Tagalogin natin yung question. If elected, ano ang gagawin mo sa first 100 days sa opisina?
We will immediately launch our 4 centerpiece programs that I've already enumerated.
So, instantaneously, on the first day in office, hindi ka ba na magsososyal, yung magpapasalamat sa mga supporter, mamamasyal sa Pilipinas, paplanuhin yung unang state visit?
No, all of this will be redundant, and in fact, it will be peripheral to the concerns that the next president must address. So I don't intend to cut any ribbons or deliver any ceremonial speeches during inaugurations.
Maganda nga palang tanong yun. You know, most presidents, yung ribbon cutting, they delegate it to their wives. Are you going to delegate the ribbon cutting to your husband, Attorney Santiago?
No, instead we shall try to effect a turnaround in the cultural and social ecology so that ribbon cutting will be relegated to the past. They don't do this anymore in the developed countries. They just go ahead and open up the plant or the factory.
Think of the ribbon manufacturers.
Yes.
Deo Casa, Villamor Air Base, ex-soldier. Ms. Santiago, ano ba ang balak mo para sa sweldo ng mga sundalo?
I have already said that one of the first steps that the next president must undertake is to increase the incomes of low-income government officials personified by public school teachers and enlisted men in the armed forces of the Philippines.
Anonymous Mrs. Santiago, you said in the presidential debate that you will devalue the peso to increase exports and prices will increase because of the devaluation. Won't that make our life harder?
No, it will not if it is accompanied by an entire package of other supportive and collaborative economic measures. Economics is very complicated. It cannot possibly be explained in simplistic terms.
Not in 1 hour anyway.
No.
Okay, Tony of Las Piñas, Mrs. Santiago, ano ang masasabi niyo tungkol sa mga kasino? Itutuloy ba ninyo?
Well, there must be a phase-out period because obviously even the casinos have a role to play in our economy at this time. So, although there is no debate that the casinos will have to go as long as the government is already economically stable, in the meantime, there must be an interregnum, a period of adjustment. There must be lead time before they can be phased out.
Francis Millar, Bulacan, magandang tanong ito. Members of the Commission on Appointments refused to confirm your designation as Secretary of DAR. There is a strong possibility that these people shall still be ruling both the upper and lower chamber of Congress. If elected president, how will you work closely with the hostile Congress?
I beg to differ from the premise of this question. I believe that they have a very weak hope, if at that, of ever returning to their positions in the Congress because of the heightened mood of antipathy against traditional politics in our country as indicated in the latest nationwide presidential surveys. But even so, I will now answer the basic question, which is how do I hope to get Congress and the executive on a footing of collaboration during my tenure? And the answer will be we will have to rely on the time-tested system of checks and balances under our constitutional system.
You're having difficulty getting senatorial candidates and a vice presidential candidate. If you win, do you think you're going to have difficulty getting cabinet members?
No, I imagine that they'll come crashing through my door. They'll probably be lining up before my threshold because there is nothing that succeeds as much as success does. President
Aquino said only recently that she made mistakes in judgment of character, apparently, and that this was the result was some of her programs fell by the wayside. What sort of a criterion would you use to select good men?
In the
and
United
women.
Nations, when I worked there in Geneva, in Switzerland, whenever we had to recruit personnel, the UN staff manual always told us to recruit on the basis of 3 criteria. Number 1, honesty or integrity. Number 2, competence in the profession. And number 3, efficiency or the capability to work hard. So honesty, competence, and efficiency are always the 3-fold stratagems for the executive search, whether in public or in the private sector. But because of the extraordinary milieu in which we find ourselves, we are virtually oppressed by an entire culture of corruption. As president, in my search for executive men and women, I would add a 4th criterion, and that should be intestinal fortitude. The administrator must be street smart.
One of the things that always happens with the president, when they take their oath of office, they go to Malacanang. I don't know if it's the water or the environment, they become isolated from the people. Mahirap nang makita, mahirap kausapin. Sometimes they don't even know what's going on right in front of the street in front of Malacanang. How do you prevent something like that? You're not a very social person.
No, I'm not. What I should do, therefore, is always to mobilize my team so that we are not bound to the air-conditioned rooms of Malacanang, but are always in touch with the field, which is what I did when I was Immigration Commissioner. In addition to running main office here in Intramuros and at the International Terminal building, I was always going around to our sub-ports, an activity that was not as highly publicized as the rest of the activities here in Manila.
One of your opponents has said he will hold office in Mindanao or elsewhere. Do you plan to do something like that?
I do not think that that will be cost-effective, but we will keep our finger on the Mindanao pulse, naturally.
Okay, nagpapasalamat po kami sa inyong pakikinig kay Secretary Santiago and Governor Lebiste for being here. At pinatayan na naman kami ng ilaw as usual with about 3/4 of all your questions still unasked. Bibigay po natin kay Secretary Santiago. Thank you very much. This is Straight from the Shoulder. This is Louis Beltran. Thank you and good night.
Momentarily.